Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel here. I wanted to do this video so that I can tell you guys which walkers you should pick up in this sale that's happening actually right now. I wanted to make sure that I get a video out before the sale is over. I'm not totally sure if it's going to be the whole rest of the week or not, but just in case, you want to make sure that you pick up the planeswalkers that will do the most for you. So let's go through all of my dual color and tricolor and colorless walker rankings. So if you don't remember, this is a page that I shared with you a couple of videos ago. By the way, before I forget, shout out to Nerd Thuggery and the rest of the Gods of Theros community. I did a little quick guest appearance on the Gods of Theros podcast. So if you're not listening to that, it's really fun. And he's going to be expanding his podcast to include the rest of the Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest community that goes beyond Gods of Theros, which, by the way, is a really huge community, and it seems like they're doing some really cool stuff in there. So shout out to Nerd Thuggery for giving me a platform to promote myself. So if you're new to my channel and Nerd Thuggery sent you here, thanks a lot. All right, so on with the show. Let's start with our white and green walkers. So Huatley Radiant Champion and a Johnny Sleeper Agent, they are both A tier to me. You can't really go wrong with either if you're looking to pick up a white-green walker. You know, they're about equal to me. You may like a Johnny Sleeper Agent slightly more because his first ability really helps to get creatures and vanguards into your hand that you want. I think his third ability is a little too slow to get going for me. I feel like I win the game way before I need to rely on that big Phyrexian poison creature that he makes with this third ability. So Huatley Radiant Champion is very creature dependent, as in for her abilities to really shine, they need to have creatures on the board. So she's very creature reliant in that regard. But if you like to play with big creatures, she's definitely a good one to go with. Now we got white and blue walkers. So, this might be a little controversial to some people, but Teferi, Akosa of Zhalfir, has taken my spot as the top blue-white walker. I believe he is, for me, the only S-tier walker in this group. I very much underrated him when I first picked him up. I think I only put him at like B tier. But the more I used him, the more I relied on him, or the more I found the utility in his abilities, especially the first one and the second one to a degree. But yeah, we got a lot of good night creatures lately, though we always had a decent amount in standard. But nowadays, I really like him. I use him for a lot of the weekly events, and he's one of my favorite planeswalkers to use if I just, want to take control of the game. And Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, he used to be an S tier walker to me, but I downgraded him a bit to A. His third ability is still one of the most powerful in the game for control. His mana gains are a little bit outclassed, especially by Teferi, Akosa, Zhalfir, Urza, Lord Protector. I think all the third, fourth, and fifth planeswalker in my rankings have better mana gains in their respective colors than Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. And these days, if your planeswalker can't hold up to mana gains that other planeswalkers have that are more being used more, it's tough to get ahead. You can fall behind and not really have a way to keep back up if for whatever reason your side of the board gets wiped as you're going through. So his first and second ability, his first is really not great. It's very below average. And his second ability is okay, but for the most part, you're just racing to get to his third. So you don't really even use his first and second that often if you're playing him right. So that's why I've downgraded him a bit and put Teferi, Akosa of Zhalfir above him, because Teferi's abilities I just find to be more useful than Teferi, Hero of Dominaria on the whole. I mean, if he had the third ability of Teferi Hero Dominaria, he'd be the one of the best walkers in the game, like maybe top 3 or 4 or something like that. That's how much I would rate him. But anyhow, those are my recommendations for white and blue walkers. And we got white and black. So Daxos, I think, is still the best black and white walker in the game. Though Kaya Urzov Usurper is really interesting and useful in a lot of ways too. I think Kaya Intangible Slayer is good too. She's very different from Kaya Urzov Usurper. Her abilities let you play in a completely different style than the original Kaya and Daxos for sure. But I think Daxos gets the leg up over Kaya Urzov Usurper for his fetching abilities. And his third ability is pretty good too, where it can do a pretty decent board wipe of creatures and then really helps to pump up the token that you create with this first ability. So, pretty useful abilities, except I don't really use a second very often. I think any of those black and white walkers are pretty decent for their respective colors. Now we got red and white walkers. I still think Kalemne, Disciple of Iroas, is the best planeswalker in red and white. I think, I guess I didn't add Quintorius Cand in here yet, but Quintorius Cand would get my second slot, and I think he's like a minus B plus walker. So just below Kalemne. Kalemne is good for just winning fast when you need to. She's not great for generating her own mana. Her first ability is good creature fetch because you can kind of target which creature you're going to fetch a lot of times depending on how you build your deck. But yeah, still a very fast, very scary walker, especially with the way red and white has been lately. Pretty strong color combo right now. So she's my number one. Quintorius Cand is my number 2. The rest of these I wouldn't bother with. Now we got blue green walkers. My favorite. Kasmina Enigma Sage is still probably my favorite planeswalker in the game. I just think that the amount of mana that she can gain from both blue and green, which are very good at generating mana just on their own, is fantastic. And then all of her abilities are useful in most stages of the game. So you can fetch with their first, give it a bunch of mana. You can copy spells with their second. And we got some great spells to copy in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So that's a really strong ability right now and that you'll want to keep using. And then her third ability is good later game. So all of her abilities are really good and they are appropriate for where you are in the game. Such a good planeswalker all around. She's still one of my go-tos for coalition events. The rest of the blue-green walkers, I just haven't been super impressed with. Nissa, Steward of the Elements, used to be a really good walker, but she is so dependent on cycle that you can't really use her in standard and expect to keep up with any of the other planeswalkers. Kiora, Master of the Depths, she's okay. I think some people still really like her, but she's more of a, if you just don't have room to use Kasmina in events, she's an okay replacement for Kasmina. I use her more in Legacy where blue and green is so broken no matter what you use that or what planeswalker you use that it doesn't really matter. Tameo Completed Sage I thought would be better, but her mana gains just aren't great. Her abilities are okay. They kind of just like knock off Tameo field researcher ability, so I don't think that you need to pick her up. Now we got blue black walkers. I love both the Ashioks. I think they're both S tier. I think I rated them a little bit lower than that before, but their abilities are both great and they play completely differently. And I think Sculptor of Fears gets an edge above Nightmare Muse just because their abilities, Ashiok Sculptor of Fears, are a little bit more universal. Nightmare Muse is a little bit more dependent on what's in standard to be really strong, but we have really good stuff in standard right now for Nightmare Muse, so both really good pickups. if you've already gotten the top 5 walkers in the game, they're definitely worth picking up. Kaito Dancing Shadow, I still contend is a pretty strong, pretty fun walker. Not as strong as the other two. I don't know if I would trust him as much in coalition events as I would the other two, though I'm not using any of these three for coalition events in general. But I think just in events, I like the Ashiaks more than Kaito Dancing Shadow. But definitely a fun walker, really unique abilities, and I think he gets a little bit underrated. We got blue red walkers. Rawl Izzet Viceroy, top 5 walker in the game, the go-to for spell loops, just wins quickly, is a scary walker to face. Even though you can kind of predict what type of decks you're going to face with him, it doesn't matter. He can still steamroll you if he gets the right hand going and right deck build against you. So still very scary to face, and pretty much just always is viable. It might take a while for people to figure him out after a rotation happens. I feel like he's the most dependent on what's in standard out of the top 5 planeswalkers. But once you get the right cards for him, or once they release the right cards for him in standard, he's a monster to face. I think he just always will be. So definitely one to pick up. Saheeli Rai and Saheeli Filigree Master. Saheeli Rai, her best attributes are her mana gains. She gets +4 on color matches and +1 on all the other colors. So no other planeswalker has quite a great rounded out mana spread like that. Problem is her abilities just don't really hold up, especially depending on what's in standard, because the constructs, creating constructs and energizing them, okay, the constructs are okay, but energize does nothing for you unless you're playing with Kaladesh cards. So unless energize makes a comeback, there's really no reason to use Saheeli Rai in standard. Yeah, then her second ability just kind of pumps up your artifact creatures, which is just okay. You don't really need to use an ability to do that. And then her third ability, if there are no really good artifact vehicles in standard, then it's kind of a waste too. So there's not a lot to do with her in standard. She's so dependent on whatever is there. So I don't really recommend her for most people. She's still solid in legacy, but I hardly ever use her there either. And Saheeli Filigree Master is to me the definition of an average walker. She's just average all around. Her abilities are just meh. Her mana gains and her life totals are meh. That's about all I gotta say for her. Black and red walk. Or no, we got black and green. Garruk Cursed Huntsman, just always going to be viable in standard. His abilities are all useful. His second ability is still one of the best in the game, and his third ability does a lot to help you win games. So, as much as Saheeli is average, he is the definition of a really good planeswalker. Just overall, no weaknesses, nothing amazing about him, but you really just can't go wrong when you use him black and green. Definitely a top 5. I don't know. Is he a top 5 walker still? He's definitely top 10, top 8 maybe. But yeah, he's a great planeswalker to pick up. He's one of the ones that people most recommend newer players pick up because he's very newbie friendly in that way. Nissa of Shadowed Bows is a tier walker, very strong. Her abilities have the potential, especially her third, has the potential to take over games and can be really fun to build around. So even though I don't think her first and second abilities are great, they're not terrible. She's a little bit more set dependent than Garruk Cursed Huntsman. You could still do a decent amount, but it depends on how well you can build for putting creatures in your graveyard, because her third ability relies so much on that. And same thing goes with Tyvar Jubilant Brawler. He's got great mana gains, and his third ability, if you can build for it in if things in standard stay relevant to his abilities. He can win fast. He's a little less reliable than some of the other black and green walkers, but to me, still a lot of fun. And yeah, don't bother with Vraska Relic Seeker. Her abilities were better at a time, but she's been outpaced by everyone else, and her mana gains are a little too flat for me to really rely on using her on anything now. So I've tried to use her lately just to see if she's improved, and no, she's just too slow with her mana gains, so don't bother with her. Black and red walkers. So Angrath the Flame Chain is, I think, still the best planeswalker in this color combo. I really still think his third ability is relevant and will stay relevant in a lot of different metas, but it really just depends on what is in standard. If you got a lot of cards that can destroy your opponent's library, then great. But he's always got discard handy for him, so he's fun. He's not as good as like any of the Bolas is, but sometimes you just want to use a different type of planeswalker with more interesting win cons than the Bolases have. So he's pretty cool. Tibalt Cosmic Imposter, he's just a really odd planeswalker. He's got great mana gains. His abilities are cool, but I find that they're a little bit win more type of play of abilities. They don't do a lot to help you get to your win. They just kind of help you get further along when you're already winning. So I don't really like his abilities that much. And Sarkhan the Mad, his abilities are not very good, and his mana gains are awful. There's one of those like weird Hibernum days of Planeswalker design that just doesn't hold up in today's meta at all. And now we got red and green walkers. Domri Chaos Bringer. I think he's an S tier walker. Some people might think he's like a E or E minus walker, but especially right now in today's standard, he's really strong. I think that his ability to fetch two creatures, give them some mana, is just a lot that will help you get a hold of your pieces that you need, especially if you're working with creature based strategies, which you will be with Dominant Chaosbringer. He's really good at getting your big creatures into your hand so that you can get them on the board and start doing a lot for you. He's very useful for certain events where the objectives are fetching or casting creatures, summoning, what have you. Pretty solid abilities in that regard. Arlen Cord, original Arlen, is kind of like a poor man's Domri. Her abilities are similar to his, but she actually got a little bit of an upgrade. I think they gave her a slight buff when I was gone from the game for a couple of years, and in that time they rebalanced her a little bit, so they made her a little better. She's not bad. She's a pretty solid B tier walker. So if you already have Domri and you just want another red green walker to play around with, there are worse, like Luca Bound to Ruin. Although I don't hate him, he's a very much an average walker. His abilities are okay. His life total is bad. It's like 92 or something. But his mana gains are good. He gets 8 on red and green. So anybody that gets 8 to green has some amount of viability to me. Samit the Tested, I think her deck limits are awful. I think you only get 4 spells and 3 supports. And that just doesn't cut it in today's meta. And then nothing about her abilities help you get around those. So they're very much dependent on having strong creatures on the board already. And having those deck limits makes it kind of difficult to do so. So I think she gets outpaced a lot. Even though her mana gains are good, her mana gains in her respective colors are good, but the ones that are not are awful, and you can really fall far behind with her. So yeah, she's just not really well designed for today's meta. And now we got the Tricolor Walkers. I think that this might be the most subjective of my rankings here, but it's hard for me to say because this is going to be an interesting one because I have Dakon as my only S tier Tricolor Walker. Dakon is pretty much known as most people's best Planeswalker in the game for a lot of good reason. I mean, he doesn't really have a lot of weaknesses. It just really comes down to play style. I don't even use him that much for a lot of reasons that I don't really want to get into right now, but he's undeniably good. What can I say about him? Tameo Field Researcher. She's very much dependent on whatever's in the meta. So she goes between S tier and A tier. I think right now, currently, with Lost Caverns of Ixalan, the great cards we got for green and white put her over into S tier again. And I'm really excited about that. So she right now gets the nod for second best tricolor walker in the game. Nicole Bolas Dragon God is, I think, the best Nicole Bolas. This is like a very hotly debated topic depending on who you ask. But people either love or hate Nicol Bolas the Ravager. I wouldn't say hate, but I feel like he just gets so overshadowed by the other Nicol Bolases that I think he's just kind of an okay walker. He's in the B tier range for me. Narset and Sarkhan. Narset I put above Sarkhan because I like her a lot more for legacy events. So I use her a lot for omniscience looping decks. She's my go-to for that. I think she runs them the best because of the amazing cards that you have in red and white in Legacy. So that's why she gets the nod above Sarkhan and Broken. But they're both planeswalkers that I use a lot more in Legacy for events that matter. And then I just play around with them and make interesting deck builds for them in standard. So Dihada, Binder of Wills, she's a C tier walker. And the reason she's a C tier walker is because she's the only one of these that is missing blue and green, which puts her at just a disadvantage right off the bat. And then her mana gains aren't great either. So I think that if they just retooled her mana gains to mitigate the fact that she doesn't have blue and green, I would bump her up a few ranks, I bet, because she can be very fun. I've made some really interesting and awesome decks for her, but I don't recommend her for newer players. I think you need a really big collection, like almost every card for her to be really good. So if you need almost every card in the game for your planeswalker to be good, that means they're not a great planeswalker. And finally, we got the colorless walkers. So at the time that I created this page, I didn't own Karn Living Legacy or Reflective Silver. So I just picked them up, and I'll add my tiers to them soon. Oh, and then I also just got Karn the Great Creator. So Karn Sign of Urza and the Great Creator, I would put at S tier. That's a little free preview for you guys for my upcoming Planeswalker review. But yeah, it really depends on how much you value their first abilities. One over the other is going to decide which one of the planeswalkers you like more of the two. So Karn Sign of Urza is still to me one of the best planeswalkers in the game. The only reason I don't use them that much is because the lack of deck slots and also the fact that you can only use the color of cards in a node of an event that correspond with it. So for example, if you're playing an event that you lock him into like a green node, you can only use green colored cards, but you can use him in if you get a 5-color node, you can use any card there. So he gets really valuable in those types of situations. So I use him a lot for certain events. I just have some saved decks for events that I play frequently, and I can just throw him in there, and I know he's probably going to take over that match. So that's how I feel about Karn and colorless walkers in general. I thought I would like Yugen the Spirit Dragon more than I did, but he's just okay. He just is kind of a poor man's Karn Sign of Urza in a lot of ways. Karn Living Legacy and Reflective Silver, I still need to use them more, but I think Living Legacy I'll put probably at a B or C tier, and I really just haven't used Reflective Silver enough to give an informed decision about where I put him. So yeah, I think those are all the walkers. Yep, those are all the ones that are available in the sale. So I hope that my talk through here will give you a reason to either pick up a planeswalker or save yourself some crystals for whatever comes next to the game in the future. All right. Well, thanks again, guys. And I hope you guys are having a good holiday season. See you next time.